afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our virtual presentation. This event is part of the Frank Islam Athenaeum Symposia series. I'm Dr. Fiona Glade from Montgomery College's Germantown campus. I'm Dean of Communication Studies, English Language for Academic Purposes, and Linguistics. As the curator for the Athenaeum series, and on behalf of Germantown Vice President and Provost Margaret Latimer, I'm honored to welcome everyone today. This distinguished speakers series is made possible through a most generous gift from philanthropist and civic leader, Mr. Frank Islam. A powerful philosophy created by Mr. Islam drives the symposia. If you conceive it, you believe it, you can achieve it. Each semester, the Athenaeum series offers relevant pressing topics in international affairs, social science, humanities, arts, politics, and economics. This year, our lineup explores the theme of civil rights, human rights, and social responsibility. In today's presentation, we celebrate Black history as Dr. Jewell Parker Rhodes talks about celebrating empathy and resilience, empowering voices for social justice. This promises to be an exciting and important contribution to our theme. You can find more information about all our speakers this year by visiting the Montgomery College Athenaeum website and by joining our mailing list. Our presentation today is being recorded and will be available on the website soon. Before we go on, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the work of a few great MC folks, some of whom you've already seen today, who have contributed to making this event happen. Ms. Kaylin Nguyen, our Athenaeum Fellows from Germantown campus, Professor Katima Lee and Professor Amanda Wilson. And thanks also to Mr. Stan Jones and Mr. Arkar Kyo-Win, our technology experts. And now, I'm delighted to introduce to you one of our amazing Montgomery College students, Mr. Trevor Garrett, who will offer our introduction to Dr. Parker Rhodes. Trevor is currently a general studies major, though he says that may change as, in his own words, he delves into philosophy, astronomy, and mythology until I'm existential. And even then, that's still not enough. I hear that Trevor is also a gifted storyteller who writes poems, stories, and songs. Esteemed guests, I give you Mr. Trevor Garrett.
Hello. I was introduced to Dr. Parker Rhodes when, in my creative writing class as an exercise, we created a bystander character in response to the opening scene of her story, Ghost Boy. This is what my character witnessed. Strange Fruit, a Nina Simone song, quietly takes place at the proverbial static in the back of my mind. No, he wasn't hung, but he was lynched. Every muscle in my body is energized and ready to go. There's a pit in my chest encasing my heart, and my eyes are focused on that dead young man like a laser. My heart leaps from my chest and runs through human barricades in vain to comfort his mother. She is suffering 2 deaths. I didn't get very far. Like the character I created, the opening pages of Ghost Boy sent remnants of that same adrenaline rush that I felt during the George Floyd protest that I feel anytime I see these kinds of things. And so I was emotionally charged. It was like I was there, felt like a Black tragedy or Black trauma. A real live Black horror, like something may pop out from just beyond your peripherals at any time. And so anytime a story like this arises, I feel it's appropriate that I write from a place of righteous fury. So the story unfolded as quickly as the final moments of the protagonist's life. And regardless of your, I'd say my respects to your spiritual beliefs, I say true to an out-of-body experience, you notice increasing levels of details until you reach a conclusion or an epiphany, a final moment. And I thought true to the human experience as well, the author captured the shock, horror, and unfortunately the awe of this moment, for it is a spectacle. Jewell Parker Rhodes is the award-winning author of several books for youth, including Black Brother, named Chicago Public Library's Best of the Best 2020, and the New York Times bestseller Ghost Boys, which has over 30 awards and honors, including the Jane Addams Peace Award. Dr. Parker Rhodes is also the author of Towers Falling, winner of the 2017 Notable Books for a Global Society and Louisiana Girls Trilogy, 9th Award, winner of a Coretta Scott King Honor Award, Sugar and Bayou Magic. Please welcome Dr. Jewell Parker Rhodes.
Thank you so much. Trevor, that was just absolutely amazing. And in particular, I love the use of righteous, and I think that really gets at what I'm trying to do in my novels. And that was just splendid. I am so happy to be here this morning, my time in Seattle, and to talk about resilience and to talk about empathy and to talk about social justice, and in particular, empowering youth. Now, I was born in Pittsburgh in a segregated, poor community. My mother abandoned the family when I was 8 months old. And so my grandmother raised me. And in fact, she had 5 of us little cousins, all under the age of 5, that she looked after because my dad was a single father and my aunt, her husband, had been killed in a bar. Now, grandmother gave us all kinds of love, but I had to rely on teachers and librarians to give me books. And what was interesting is that I was able to use my imagination to make my life less lonely, to make me feel as though the world and all my problems weren't my fault, that there was an other out there, and then there was an inside me that could have love and hope and resilience. The unfortunate thing about that was that all the books that my teachers and librarians gave me were books with white characters written by white people. And in fact, this is hard to believe, especially after Trevor did his amazing introduction for his, in his work in his creative writing class, that when I went to school, K through 12, and also college, 8 years of college, I was never once given a book by a person of color. So even though I wrote all the time and did my poetry and my fiction, though Trevor, I was not a good poet. Even though I did that, I never knew that I could be a writer. I never knew that America had made space for the stories that came from my heritage. And it wasn't until I finally realized too that all along my grandmother had been filling me with the African-American oral tradition, telling me stories on the porch, and she was giving me my real legacy and inheritance. But when I was a junior in college, I went into the library at Carnegie Mellon University, and I saw a book called Corregidor by Gail Jones on the new fiction shelf. And I got that book down, and it was about, the slave trade. It was about the South. And I was like, what? Black women write books? And I switched my major to English the very next day. And all my creative writing classes were dominated by white students, and they would say to me, Jewell, why didn't you tell me your characters were Black? And I'd say, well, why don't you tell me, your characters are white? And I learned the tragedy that I was part of a generation of children who had learned how to read and think white in terms of the context of stories that deserve to be told. And so it took me a legacy and a time to break through all of that, to really rename myself in a way that rooted me in African-American history and African-American literature and my grandmother's wonderful teachings. I'm the generation of college professors who fought for ethnic studies and women's studies to be in the academy. We were the ones, leading the way. I was also the young woman who was guided by the grace of my grandmother, who would say things like, Jewel child, wear clean underwear, always. And she was telling me in her unique way that I should respect myself. And she would also say, Jewel child, there's nobody in the world better than you, and you're no better than anybody else. We're all a mixed blood stew. Now, grandmother never finished 3rd grade. She had to take care of us kids. And yet she was the wisest woman that I know. And she gave me that source of social justice, social equity, that wellspring to draw upon. So when I started writing, I knew I wanted to take grandmother, my heritage, and infuse it in stories so there would never be another child who grew up without knowing, without seeing themselves in America's literature. Now, one of the things that we contend with is the master narrative, and that was a phrase created by Toni Morrison. America's master narrative has always been white, and yet it is African Americans who have added the most unique literary tradition ever to America. And that was Frederick Douglass and many others with their autobiographies about being slaves. That is unique to America. Now, the important thing about that African-American tradition, it's about coming into that stage of being, I am, coming in that stage of being, steady and strong on your own 2 feet, that your freedom is not what somebody just gives to you, though you can fight to escape being held as a slave, but your freedom comes from within. It comes from your education and sense of self. And I don't know if you remember in reading Frederick Douglass's narrative, there's a point where the slave breaker is so angry at him that he's beating him for hours. And Frederick Douglass says, if you're going to try to subdue me, suppress my spirit, you're going to have to kill me. And it was at that moment when the slave beater sort of backed down, because Frederick wasn't his property, but also he was startled by the fact that Frederick was willing to die for his sense of being I am. Now, it wasn't until years later that Frederick actually became free, but that idea that you have this arc of character development moving from being a slave, being born, to becoming free psychologically is really the key for Frederick Douglass. And I maintain it is the key for all of us. And in a minute, I'll get to that point where it is still us rewriting that slave story, where through our own self-love, our own self-compassion, through representation, all people of color, of different genders, of different religions, stand tall and know that they in and of themselves are enough. Now, I've written for adults, but now I'm writing primarily for youth, and I'm going to talk about ghost boys. I didn't want to write ghost boys. And in fact, when my editor said, Jewell, do you want to write about the murder of young Black boys? Trevor, you know what I said? No, forget it. And for months I said no, but I think my publisher saw in me something that I didn't know that I had, the ability to actually do this. But I did make a pledge with my editor that if the novel did not come out right, we simply wouldn't publish it. Because as in my I am, my legacy, like Frederick Douglass, like my grandmother who gave up so much to care for a bunch of kids, my integrity and meeting the needs of my community are more important than anything, certainly more important than money. Now, in order to write a story, I have to hear the character. I have to feel the voice. And one of the things that happened is from my dreaming states, walking or being in bed or doing the dishes, all of a sudden Jerome came to me. And he came to me in this chapter 1. How small I look, laid out flat, my stomach touching ground. My right knee bent and my brand new Nike stained with blood. I stoop and stare at my face, my right cheek flattened on concrete. My eyes are wide open, my mouth too. I'm dead. I thought I was bigger, tough, but I'm just a bit of nothing. My arms are outstretched like I was gonna fly like Superman. I'd barely turn, sprinting. Pow, pow. 2 bullets gave way. 2 bullets, legs gave way. I fell flat, hard. I hit snowy ground. Ma's running, she's wailing. My boy, my boy. A policeman holds her back. Another policeman is standing over me, murmuring, it's a kid, it's a kid. Ma's struggling, she gasps like she can't breathe. She falls to her knees and screams. I can't bear the sound. Sirens wail. Other cops are coming. Did someone call an ambulance? I'm still dead. Alone on the field, the policeman closest to me is rubbing his head. In his hand, his gun dangles. The other policeman is watching Ma like she's gonna hurt someone. Then he shouts, stay back. People are edging closer, snapping pictures, taking video with their phones. Stay back. The policeman's hand covers his holster. More people come. Some shout. I hear my name. Jerome. It's Jerome. Still, everyone stays back. Some curse, some cry. Doesn't seem fair. Nobody ever paid me any attention. I skated by, kept my head low. Now, I'm famous. I was bereft when Tamir Rice was killed, Trayvon Martin was killed, Laquan McDonald was killed, and Ghost Boys is taking on a new life post the murder of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and so many more. While that inspired me, what also inspired me to write Ghost Boys, to give it a try, were 3 things. 1, I was a child when Emmett Till was murdered. And I remember seeing his body, and his body has haunted me for over 60 years, his murdered, tortured body. 2, I'm now a grandmother. Hallelujah, I love it. And I wanted to know, why is it that in my lifetime, I grew up with young Black children being ripped from their innocence and murdered. And now as a grandmother, it's still happening. And 3, I was inspired by the notion that if we can get young people who I know are empathetic and loving to remember the goodness in their hearts when they are young, and to keep it as they go into the voting booth, as they march in BLM protests, that we can finally change the world. That adults sometimes are still sort of beset by implicit bias, still beset by racism. So my glory, my hope goes towards today's youth. Now I'm going to share my screen with you. All righty. And here is Ghost Boys and Emmett Till. Interestingly enough, Emmett Till had only been in Money, Mississippi for 6 days before he was murdered. He had begged his mom to let him go play with his cousins and to stay at his uncle's house, really his uncle's shack. And he was there 6 days before he was accused of assaulting a white woman, Miss Carolyn Bryant. Now, if you look at history, and this again goes back to master narratives that privilege the white space have said for decades on Wikipedia, on online research, even in books, and unfortunately, even in books written by people of color for both adults and children, there were all these sort of like innuendos that Emmett may have done something that made him partly responsible for his own death. How could that possibly be? How could a child be responsible for their own death? Some people in some research materials said, he said, hey baby, while he was, talking to Miss Bryant. Some say, that he whistled at her, a wolf whistle, when in fact Emmett did have a stutter and he may have gone, "Whew," the wolf sound, the W sound that came out like a whistle. But actually he did absolutely nothing wrong. And as far as I know, my book is the only book that shows Emmett as the innocent that he was, that he simply tried to give her a penny to pay for his candy, and his fingers may have touched Mrs. Bryant's palm. And that was a no-no in the segregated South. But that's all he did. And everything else was a lie. And Miss Carolyn Bryant, she actually admitted it was a lie a few years ago. And there was a book called The Blood of Emmett Till. And Miss Bryant finally said at the age of 82 that that boy didn't do anything to die for. So there was a lie about Emmett that was perpetuated for decades. But what wasn't a lie, what was a powerful truth, was his mama. And his mama, who reminds me of that big-hearted love and standing for justice of my grandmother, she had to fight for her son's body to be sent back from Mississippi. The government didn't want to give it up. And then once she got her son's body, she had to fight to see her son. And relatives said, "Oh, no, you don't want to see him. You don't want to see him." And she said, "No, I do." And when she saw her son, she said, "I want the whole world to see what they've done to my boy." And what she did was she bore witness. And in bearing witness, she started the power of the civil rights movement. Certainly not all by herself, but she gave it a new catalyst, a new force, a new sense of, yes, we've got to get social justice done. And down in the far your right-hand corner, I believe, you'll see Miss Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks, almost 6 months to the day that Emmett was killed, said, "I'm not sitting in the back of the bus anymore." And that's her mugshot. You had Martin doing his important work of the civil rights marches, the speech on Washington, and Malcolm, he's the man with the glasses, and his paper, the Muhammad paper, says, "Your freedom can't wait." The Muslim Muhammad Speaks Journal. And I have over in the other corner, Tommy Smith and Juan Carlos at the 1968 Olympics. And by that time, Emmett had been dead for about 14 years. And I was a young teenager, but I remember this moment when they raised their hands after getting the gold and the bronze Olympic medals, and they said basically Black power with their image, that they were proud Americans, proud athletes, but they were saying it is time for social justice to come for Black people. And I tell kids today that is what Colin Kaepernick and the footballers are doing, that the tradition of bearing witness, my grandmother did with her oral stories and telling me about social justice. Bearing witness was what Mrs. Till did. Bearing witness was what these athletes did. Bearing witness continues, and also bearing witness can happen in all kinds of different ways. You can have song. Remember, "We Shall Overcome" was a song that bore witness. Voting, as we saw down in the Georgia races, can help bear witness. Marching, participating, and saying no more is bearing witness. So that's what all of us have the power to do. And it isn't really just an African American thing. It is also a human thing, that we bear witness in order to ensure empathy, resilience, and in order to make sure the next generations know that we have the power to make the world better. Now, here are some wonderful images of young people in Washington, D.C., bearing witness, talking about climate change, social justice, getting rid of guns, and in particular, children resonate with the idea that Jerome says in the book, you can't undo wrong. You can only do our best, your best, to make things right. And that's what I've tried to do in presenting Ghost Boys to adults and children alike. So yes, tragedy has happened. What are you going to do about it?
Why?
Why?
Why are you following me?
Why my hoodie make me look suspicious?
Why does my music make me dangerous?
Why are the people that are supposed to protect me attacking me?
Why are you afraid of me? Why do you think I'm dangerous? Why do I afraid of people who are supposed to protect me?
Why can't I make a peace sign without you labeling a gang sign?
Why does standing your ground only work when I'm on the ground?
Why do you show this photo over this one?
Why do you only stop and frisk me?
Why do you have low expectations for me?
Why can't I run down the street without causing alarms?
Why do you think I'm a thug?
Why do you assume I'm armed?
Why can I breathe? Why is my mom scared every time I leave the house?
Why are you targeting me?
Why am I a target?
Why?
Why? I know why.
And it has to stop.
It must stop.
Because I have dreams.
Because I can change the world.
Because I'll make a difference.
Because I have a family.
Because I am strong.
Because I'm talented.
I have a voice.
I can find a cure.
I have goals.
I can lead the country.
I am determined.
I have a future.
Because I'm a scholar.
I am powerful.
I'm someone's friend.
I'm someone's brother.
I'm someone's son.
Someone loves me.
And because my life matters too.
My life matters.
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 Our lives matter.
And so did theirs.
I think the police siren is very interesting, but this filmmaker, Carrie Laurel Davis, she too is bearing witness with this public service announcement against racism and implicit bias. And I'm going to move to here. Bear witness. Now, I did not know that my novel would end with a spoken word. And you'll notice that Jerome is no longer Jerome. He, in the arc of the novel, becomes Ghost Boy. And he says, bear witness, my tale is told. Wake, only the living can make the world better. Live and make it better. Don't let me or anyone else tell this tale again. Peace out, Ghost Boy. Now, for those of you that haven't read the novel, I just want to make clear that actually Jerome as a ghost is tutored by the ghost of Emmett in terms of finding someone among the living who can make the world better. And the people that can see Jerome or see all the dead ghost boys, those are the people who are going to be inspired to make the world a better place. So who sees Jerome in particular? Sarah, the white police officer's daughter. And I did that on purpose because I know that there are lots of wonderful white folks who have open hearts, open minds, who have empathy, and Sarah is one of them. I also wanted to show that it is the young generation and you as young people, that you don't need to agree with the biases, the stereotypes that sometimes your elders may carry, that you, the child, whether you be 8, 18, or just think you're the 27-year-old, young man or young woman, you can bear the weight to change the world. Now, some people ask me, why do I begin the novel with dead and alive and I go back and forth? And that also comes from the idea that my grandmother in the African diaspora spiritual tradition taught that the space between the living and the dead is very thin. So that's like a lot of South Asian cultures and a lot of Native American cultures. It's like Day of the Dead and Mexican cultures, that the ancestors, the elders are moving us along, and that they are creating the circumstances that make me I am. And I am responsible for creating the circumstances and a legacy for the generations after me, for them to say, I am. And yet we're all connected by our wonderful heritage. So the grandmother, Jerome's sister, Carlos, the young man who gave Jerome the gun, who is an Hispanic young man, they all have a sense of the spiritual tradition. And yet it's Sarah, because of her open-mindedness, that has to learn it. One point that I do want to make is that all of my works are multi-ethnic. So that Jerome, Carlos, the young Hispanic man, Sarah, the young white girl, they all have important character arcs. And the reason is it goes back to those civil rights pictures. It goes back to the BLM protests that are happening today, that we need a coalition. And I open my arms to all of you and say, join the coalition to make the world better. We need people of all ethnic heritages, of all genders, all religions, from all over the world, that we need everyone to speak up and say, this is not right. The murder of George Floyd, and so on. I do want to say that racism affected my life. Racism almost made it so that I didn't discover my dream of being a writer. It's like the horizon hadn't been open to me. And I'm also the mother who has raised a Black son. So I think some people will say that, when you have a son or a daughter of color, the fear that when they go outside the door that they might not come back sort of always stays with you. I'm proud that I've written Ghost Boys. It's helped a lot of young people in particular talk about, justice, and talk about resilience, and talk about empathy. And I create safe places for schools, universities, elementary schools, and for parents to begin these conversations. No one is too young to know. And the reason why I say no one is too young to know is because racism and its implicit bias starts to affect children of color as early as preschool. That there is documentary evidence from social scientists, from psychologists, that racial bias, implicit bias, prejudice affects how white people see children of color, even in the preschool level. There are actual images of 5-year-olds being sort of unruly, maybe in kindergarten. But can you imagine how unruly do you have to have them call the police on you? There are images of 5-year-olds, being handcuffed and crying, There are images of Black kids, such as my son, who when they become, teenagers, all of a sudden people who have known him, all of a sudden go, oh, this is a thug. So those images are in our air, in our soil, in our water, and those images are causing trauma for kids. I will never forget the day when I was in Boston and I had spoken to a group of young Black kids, and this boy came up to me after reading Ghost Boys and hearing about it. And he says, you mean this is a pattern discriminating against children of color? And I said, yes, it's a pattern. And he said to me, and I nearly broke down and cried, because he said to me, I thought it was me. He did not know about Emmett. He did not know about the links from slavery to now and how stereotypes still affect everything. So children of color, whether you be Muslim, Pakistani, African, Portuguese, are being seen as ruthless, elder, sexually promiscuous, being seen as not innocence. The 12-year-old all of a sudden becomes the man who was threatening me, or someone, you know, who actually is a man becomes so threatening in people's eyes that you need 5, 6, 7 cops to subdue him. These images are still causing great harm today. Now I'm going to shift a little bit and go back to sharing my screen. And I am going to talk about Black Brother. I'm also going to see if I can close this window. Okay. And here is Black Brother, and it shows 2 brothers who are biracial, same parents, but one presents as Black and one presents as white. Okay, and I'm going to show you my family when I was a youngster and my husband was a youngster. Here, let me hold on for a second and close this window. I was actually in Maryland, thank you very much, when I had the good fortune to fall in love with this Viking descendant, this fellow from Norway, who's 6'4", his hair turns blonde in the summer and blue eyes. But though I was grateful to be in love, I was also afraid of racism. As you know, interracial marriages have been prohibited. It wasn't until the 60s that it became, quote, legal. And also in Maryland, we experienced a lot of racism. We experienced a lot of threats. So I said, I'll marry you, but we're not going to have any children because I don't want our kids to have the trauma of being biracial in America. Can you imagine that in my lifetime, I would be so scared of racism? Well, clearly things have gotten better and that we have a much more multiracial, multi-ethnic society. And I'm grateful that I've had my kids. But if you notice, Kelly looks like her dad and Evan looks like me. And that made all the difference in the world. That I was Kelly's nanny to people who saw us together. My husband, he was like, oh, you adopted a kid, you know, from Africa or the Caribbean. Oh, you're such a wonderful person. They had this whole idea that we were not a family because we did not fit together by color. And in fact, when Kelly was born, she had to get a surgery. And when they brought my child back, they brought back a brown baby boy. They color matched us. And then before I left the hospital, they sent a social service worker because they assumed that as a woman of color, I was a single mother. My son was 2 when Rodney King and the LA riots happened. And it was just terrifying because then my husband really finally understood that if Evan became a big, tall, young Black man, that someone might look at him the way they looked at Rodney King, and you would have more than a dozen police officers just beat him just for being him. So that fear and that awfulness of raising our children and having race try to destroy us as a family has been traumatic. And we as a nation with Black Brother, I argue, need to stop that. That in fact, race itself is a myth. This is a picture of photos taken by Angelica Das, who has so far documented that there are over 4,000 human skin tones. So the idea that there is a Black and a white is ridiculous. Also, the idea then that someone would take brown skin and use that distinction as an excuse to enslave and oppress. And this happens worldwide, not just in the past, but today, is really revolting when you consider that skin color is like hair. Is it curly or is it straight? eye color? Is it blue or is it brown or is it green? You know, are you tall or are you short? It's a superficial distinction that the master narrative white society has used, colonizers has used to oppress. And it's all one big lie. I see Ghost Boys and Black Brother as companion pieces. And I'm gonna stop sharing right now because here Jerome dies and he relies on the living to make the world better. But in Black Brother, I try to demonstrate a strong, loving family who keep tight regardless of how the world sees them. And Dante in particular, though he did not have police bias right away, he had its corollary school bias, that in schools, you know, because of his skin color, he was seen as a troublemaker. And the novel starts with him being arrested and carted off to jail. Why? Because he was frustrated and he slammed down his backpack. Now, this actually happened in my family. My son went through 4 or 5 different schools trying to find a place where someone could just see him as a person. And eventually we went to Boston. We went to a prep school like these 2 brothers went to. And I remember being called and told that I needed to get my son. Why? Well, I went to see, and he was upset about something. He was pacing. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't have a stick. There was nobody near him. He wasn't hurting anybody or threatening anybody. But as soon as I got to this predominantly white school, the white administrator said to me, next time, I'm gonna call the police. And I nearly fainted. So here's the question. If you're a child of color, regardless of what your specific ethnic heritage is, and you are threatened walking down the streets, and you are threatened in school, where do you find the safe place to be? Where do you find the safe place to bloom and be all that you can be in terms of being a human being? Now, you remember what my grandmother said, we're all a mixed blood stew. Now, she didn't finish the 3rd grade. And at Arizona State University, where I teach, we have the Institute for Human Origins, which has the bones of Lucy. So really, all of us are descendants from the first humanoid mother that anthropology has discovered, and that was Lucy. And Lucy's from Africa. So all of us, of course, are brown, Black, African, which I love the idea of giving all white supremacists heritage tests. So we can just show them how they are not so pure and that in fact, they might have ancestors that come from Africa. Well, I know that they do. Historically, they do. But I'm gonna read you a short scene from Black Brother. Dante has been suspended. He has a court case coming up and he's walking in his neighborhood, and his neighborhood is primarily white and primarily wealthy, because I also wanted to demonstrate that even class does not shield you from racism or bias. So he's walking behind curtains. Is someone wondering, why isn't he in school? Why is he here in our neighborhood? What if someone didn't get the message that the Ellison family had integrated the neighborhood? That they have 2 biracial sons, actually multiracial. I'm Scotch, Irish, Norwegian, and African. Mom thinks Nigerian and Congolese. I slow. Nikes keep me from slipping, but I still feel like I'm falling. I start shivering, trembling all at once, shivering because of the cold, trembling because of my mixed up feelings. Black brother. I turn, thinking someone is taunting me. The street is quiet, not even a person or a person walking a dog. I face forward. Black brother, black brother. Black brother is all Middlefield Prep can see. Then there's me. Skin color is just a part of me. I squat right on the sidewalk, feeling crazy, overcome. It hurts to think for Alan, a kid like me, my inside self doesn't matter. I panic. I've got to stand. Someone might call the police. Black brother, words are being carried by the wind. No one else but me can hear it. My mind is blown. Alan wanted other students to see only my blackness, see it as a stain. I remember Alan's contorted, electrified face yelling at me outside the police car. Like I conjured it. A squad car turns the corner. Turning too fast toward home, I slip. My gloved hand lands on ice. I stagger up. The patrol car slows. My heart races. 2 officers stare. I push my hood away from my face. Let them see me. Let them know I've nothing to hide. Sirens blare. I freeze, red and blue lights flash. My heart beats fierce. I want to run faster than I've ever run before, but something horrible might happen. Exhaling, I close my eyes, waiting to be arrested. The siren's wail becomes more distant. Amazingly, the black and white speeds down the street. Crime must be elsewhere, or maybe not. Maybe it's just another black kid walking on the street, on the road, just walking, trying to mind his own business, like me. So police bias, school bias, but the big thing about Dante is that he decides to beat his bully with fencing and becomes a great fencer. And actually that comes from the fact that I loved swords as a kid, but it wasn't until I was 25. And here is the master narrative again, that I found out Alexandre Dumas, who wrote The Three Musketeers, The Man in the Iron Mask, was actually a black man. There he is with that wonderful afro from the 17th century. Can you see? I think so. Did I make do share correctly? And the thing is that if I had known that, Alexandre Dumas was a black man and that fencers could be black, I might have become a fencer. But in truth, Alexandre Dumas, who is read as widely as the Bible, who is read as widely 2 centuries later as Shakespeare, who's considered one of the foremost writers in the world, he was actually writing about his dad, the Black Count. And his dad was the son of a Haitian slave and a French aristocrat. And his son went on to become one of the greatest fencers of all time. And he was Napoleon's best #1 general. And Napoleon was so jealous at the Black Count for being so terrific and so, just statuesque and wondrous, that in the Count of Monte Cristo, when the prisoner is hidden away and locked away for years, that was actually him. Napoleon disappeared him the same way in which the master narrative disappears Black people of color's accomplishments. And popular culture, TV, movies, they keep showing this whitewashing. You have to be a Three Musketeer, you have to be a white person. And so I love the idea of saying colorism is no, using the 2 brothers to show that, they are both equal and one didn't deserve to be treated any less than the other. And also in the Rio Olympics, we had the most multi-ethnic fencing team ever. And last night I spoke to Idabaji Muhammad, who won the bronze in the saber. She won fencing wearing a hijab. And there were also 2 Asian Americans and 4 African Americans. Woohoo! But why did that happen? Because of many people, but one in particular, I'll cite Peter Westbrook in his nonprofit foundation in New York City, who trains, 200 Black and brown kids every week, to be fencers. So many of the champions that are fencing today come from Peter Westbrook, who himself was a champion, who is bearing witness by teaching to the next generation. And here's my favorite phrase, where Jerome has to die in order to encourage others to bear witness. Dante, he wins the fencing champion, and he's supposed to shake hands with Alan, and he's not sure if Alan, the white bully, is going to shake his hand. And he finally says to himself, I don't care what Alan thinks. I know who I am. And his message to everyone, whether you're 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, is to be you, even if others can't see you. And so those 2 books together, to me, I'm trying to teach resilience. I'm trying to teach empathy. I'm trying to give everyone the armor for how do you deal with prejudice, discrimination. You be yourself, that you love yourself, you have compassion for yourself. And I'm also trying to make images where people of all colors can see themselves in a book and know that they matter and that their lives have meaning. And I'll stop there.
That's okay, Dr. Parker Rhodes. That was really phenomenal. Thank you very, very much. And everybody, please join me in thanking Dr. Jewell Parker Rhodes for her phenomenal work and for this powerful reading and her inspiring, brilliant words today. I love this idea of sword fighting with words.
Fiona, that's beautiful. That's marvelous. I like that too. I like that too.
I think the presentation is a real call to action for us to continue here our great work of promoting radical inclusion that we aspire to at MC, and to the kind of things we do in countering racism at MC and in our communities. This important work of bearing witness. And we appreciate, Dr. Rhodes, how you've helped us bring that to the fore today and help us think about how to continue it.
You're thank you. And just you didn't see the picture of my family?
Yes, we saw that one.
And you saw the picture of all the different colors of
yes, the photographs. Yes,
because
yes.
I do think I just wanted that to be. For those of you who didn't know, in Towers Falling, I write about Muslim characters, as well as African American and white characters, or I've written about Chinese characters. That inclusivity that Dr. Glebe was talking about, that you are being a part of, is so important. We have superficial differences, but the heart, the mind, the soul of humanity is what includes all of us. We are kin, we are family.
Yes, and from the same roots, as you so importantly pointed out. Lucy is everyone's mother. And our time has come to a close, so we will finish with those really thought-inspiring words. Please join me once again in thanking Dr. Parker Rhodes for her excellent presentation. And thanks to all of you too for your great comments in chat and for your questions that will help us continue this conversation and keep bearing witness.
I want to send all of you guys love. And my children were born in Montgomery County. And there was a time in my life when I lived in the area, and I would have given anything to have had a job at your great college. You guys are known for excellence. You are known for inclusion. And it was not to be for me, but when I was asked to speak for you all, I felt as though I was coming home. So young people, stay Stay strong, stay brave, be you. You have a great heritage just at your college in and of itself for advocacy. So bravo. And
Yeah.
thank you,
Thank you, Jewell. Jewell, I hope you do think of MC as your home, because we want you to.
Well, when I come back to visit my in-laws, I'll stop over and I will visit you guys. Yes. So I'll see you all again in the future. And then if any of you have any questions for me or any follow-up, don't hesitate to email me. You are marvelous. And in fact, my grandchild and daughter and son-in-law may actually be moving back to the area. So maybe we can have a partnership of beautiful things to happen. But if you need books or you need ideas, or if you ever want to talk, know that you have a friend in me. And even if it's 10 years from now, just remember to say Montgomery College. And I'll go, oh yes, what can I do for you? You guys are awesome.
Oh,
Okay.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. You know, the recording is going to be posted on the Montgomery College Athenaeum webpage soon. And meanwhile, the Athenaeum celebration of Black history will continue next week with an African-American read-in, which is an open mic event on 4th of March from 12:30 to 3:30. So the link for that event has just been added to the chat. I think it's also posted on the MC webpage. So we hope to see everyone there and be ready to listen or to read at the event. And again, to Jewell Parker Rhodes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.